So who really is my favorite author? I came up with an equation to try to answer that question. Stephen King has been my favorite author for 25, maybe 30 years. And recently I've been asking myself the question whether or not that could ever change. Does he just get a pass because he's been a favorite for so long, that long legacy of me loving his works? Is that going to go on the next 25 or 30 years of my life? Or can another author come along that I proclaim this person is my favorite author? I've literally been thinking about this question for a couple years now, essentially with the rise of a couple new authors I've discovered in the last 5 years, Robin Hobb, Guy Gavriel Kay, to name a couple. And I've been asking myself, can anybody ever be called my favorite author, or does King just get a pass for the rest of my life? So I came up with an equation, and this equation has a little bit of objectivity, and that's what I was trying to do, is I was trying to more objectively look at the authors that I love and try to think about the different ways that I could perhaps compare their works, how I feel about their works, and to come up with the answer, who really is my favorite author? So I came up with 5 categories, and of these 5 categories, 2 of the categories that I'm going to measure my favorite authors are 100% objective. The other 3 categories are subjective, but I'm comparing authors in the same manner. So at least I'm comparing apples to apples and looking at the exact same unit of measure that I'm going to compare my favorite authors. So I took 25 authors that I consider my favorite, and I ranked them in all 5 of these categories. For each of these categories, first place would get 25 points, second place 24 points, all the way down to 25th place would get 1 point. In the case of ties, in order to make each of the 5 categories equal, I averaged the points for the places that people would tie. So if there's a 3-way tie for first place, those places would normally be 25, 24, 23 points. I'd average them together, they would get 24 points. That way each of the categories does not benefit by getting extra points if there happen to be ties within that category. So the 5 categories that I'm using to determine who my favorite author is, at least based on this equation, are number of books read, percentage of books that an author has put out that I've read. So those 2 are the objective categories. Third category is number of books that I gave 5 stars. Fourth category, percentage of books read by an author that I gave 5 stars. And the 5th category is average star rating that I've given all of an author's works. Now those last 3 are subjective, but at least examining them in this manner, I'm able to better compare different authors in these categories based on my subjective rankings. Now, I've had a GOODREADS account since I think 2009, so I was able to go back and just look at a lot of different ratings of the books that I've read in the past 15 years or so. Now, some of those I did change, so if you would go to my GOODREADS account, you may find a few outliers in there that I looked at, and when I was crunching the numbers, I just changed mentally in my head. I didn't go update my GOODREADS account. I didn't think about ratings consistently over that time, although for the most part, I would say 90 to 95% of the time, I just trusted those ratings. Now, for authors and books that I've read before I had a GOODREADS account, I just had to use my memory. Some of these authors, I've read so many books, I had to do a spreadsheet for them, but I was able to, I guess, get the best idea of what their overall ratings are for all of the books that I've read by them. So a few things before I give you my 25 authors. Short fiction, first of all. For short fiction, I basically did not include short fiction in an author's output unless it's an entire collection of short fiction by an author. If it's part of a compilation, I did not include that. Now, there's one author that I didn't include in that rule at all, though, and that's Isaac Asimov. If you know anything about Isaac Asimov, he was a big recycler of his works. You could find some of his short stories in 6, 7, 8 different collections. So the only collections of Asimov's short fiction that I included are the ones that became novels, like I, Robot, Foundation, those kinds of books. But for the most part, every other author, short fiction, if it's a collection of their entire works in a collection of short fiction, I went ahead and included it. So for novellas, I did not include novellas with the exception of John Steinbeck. And the reason is John Steinbeck's novellas have become classics. And how could I examine my love of John Steinbeck without having Of Mice and Men and some of the other great novellas that I've read by him in that total? So novellas are not included except for Steinbeck. So a couple other things. I crunched these numbers on May 12th. So some authors have come out with books after that time that I did not include in this count. I've read some books by authors after that time that I did not include when I did my calculation. Additionally, I want to talk about co-authorship. In a case where I feel both authors equally contributed, I just included it in both counts. So, for instance, Robert Jordan, when you see the title, the number of books I've read by him, that does include the 3 that were finished by Sanderson at the end of Wheel of Time, and those books also count towards Brandon Sanderson's total. For the case of pseudonyms, I included them within the author whose name appears most. So the Megan Lindholm books are part of Robin Hobb's output. The Richard Bachman books are part of Stephen King's output. So the 25 authors that I'm choosing to rank with this equation are Joe Abercrombie, Isaac Asimov, Kate Atkinson, James Clavell, Michael Connelly, Bernard Cornwell, Justin Cronin, Charles Dickens, David Eddings, Stephen Erikson, Raymond E. Feist, Ken Follett, David Gemmell, Frank Herbert, Robin Hobb, Robert Jordan, Guy Gavriel Kay, Stephen King, Dennis Lehane, George R.R. Martin, Haruki Murakami, Brandon Sanderson, Dan Simmons, John Steinbeck, and J.R.R. Tolkien. So before I give you the answer to this question, and before I even do that, I'll look at some of the categories so you can see who did well in some of the different categories. I'm going to give you a subjective top 10. So I listed my top 10 authors before I crunched the numbers as if I were going to film a video today about my top 10 favorite authors. My top 10 authors would have been Stephen King, number 1, Guy Gavriel Kay, number 2, Robin Hobb, number 3, Michael Connelly, number 4, John Steinbeck, number 5, Dennis Lehane, number 6, Joe Abercrombie, number 7, Haruki Murakami, number 8, Bernard Cornwell, number 9, and Kate Atkinson, number 10. And we'll see in just a couple minutes how those 10 fared when I crunch the numbers. So let's look at the top 5 of each category, starting with most books read. Well, there's no surprise that Stephen King dominated this and gets first place, 25 points. Michael Connelly was a distant second. He gets 24 points. And then the next 4 were actually pretty tight, close together. Robin Hobb gets 23 points, Robert Jordan 22 points, and then tied for 5th, Brandon Sanderson and Haruki Murakami both get 20.5 points. The next category is the percentage of books by an author that I've read. And this had a 5-way tie for first place, but since it is a 5-way tie, they each get 22 points when I average the total points. Those 5 authors are Joe Abercrombie, Michael Connelly, Justin Cronin, Dennis Lehane, and J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, just a word with Tolkien. For Tolkien, I really had to just come up with a decision of what I was going to include for his books. And what I came up with was Hobbit, Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return of the King, and Silmarillion. And yes, some of you could argue Silmarillion was after he died. You could argue that the 3 Lord of the Rings books were published separately, but he wanted it to be 1 book, but it was published as 3 books, so I count it as 3 books. So those are the only 5 books I considered for Tolkien. For everything else, I consider that a little bit more of Christopher Tolkien's work, just compiling kind of the writings that not necessarily were going to be published by Tolkien. All right, next category, 5-star books. And not a surprise that Stephen King is number 1, 25 points. Michael Connelly is number 2, 24 points. Robin Hobb, number 3, 23 points. Guy Gavriel Kay, number 4, 22 points. And Brandon Sanderson rounding out the top 5 with 21 points. Now the next category is the percentage of books that I've read by an author that I gave 5 stars. In first place, we have Guy Gavriel Kay with 25 points. Justin Cronin, 24 points. Tied for 3rd, we have J.R.R. Tolkien and David Gemmell, so they each get 22.5 points. And 5th place, Stephen Erikson, 21 points. I've only read 4 books by Erikson, but he's in the top 5 here because I did give 3 of those books 5 stars. And the final category is average star rating of an author. And the top 5 are Justin Cronin, number 1, J.R.R. Tolkien, number 2, Guy Gavriel Kay, number 3, David Gemmell coming in at 4th, and John Steinbeck coming in at 5th. Now, before I reveal my top 10 authors based on this equation, I want to give you 3 outliers. These are outliers that I put in my subjective top 10 that did not make the top 10. And the first one was one of the biggest surprises when I crunched the numbers, because at number 23, we have Kate Atkinson. So Kate Atkinson does have lower ratings here. Kate Atkinson is in my top 10 by the strength of two books. Her Life After Life and A God in Ruins are two of my favorite books of all time. I love those books. But I've read, as you can see, a small percentage of what she's written. I've read a low number of total books by her, and her average rating is pretty low because everything else I've read so far just hasn't quite stacked up to that. But it's still a surprise for me to see Atkinson at 23. Another big surprise is the author I had in ninth was Bernard Cornwell, and he didn't make the top 10, and he finished as low as number 20. Now, I knew going in with Cornwell that he was going to finish low in percentage of books read because he's written so much. And even though I've read 12 or 13 books by him, he has like 30 sharp books that I haven't even touched yet. So I knew he would finish low there. But it seems like with Cornwell, he doesn't have a lot of low-rated books, but he has a lot of 4-star books. And when you compare that with a lot of these other authors that have more 5-star books, his average rating was kind of bottom 10. Percentage of 5-star reads was bottom 10 as well. So Cornwell sits here at 20th. The other author that I put into my subjective top 10, but just missed out at 12th, is Haruki Murakami. Now, I knew with Murakami is one of those authors that's not consistent. He has some really great books. You see that he's top 8th in 5-star reads, and he has some bottom 8 in percentage of 5-star reads and average rating, although he did finish high in total books read, tied for 5th. So let's look at my top 10 favorite authors based on this equation. Number 10, he wasn't in my top 10, but it wasn't a huge surprise to me, and that's Brandon Sanderson. So you see Sanderson finished top 5 in both books read and 5-star books. Just out of the top 10 in percentage of 5-star reads. Kind of bottom 10 in percentage of books read because he is prolific, and his average rating is bottom 8 because he's not always most consistent for me, but has enough score to put him in the top 10 for sure. Number 9 is the author I had 6th, and that is Dennis Lehane. So you see that he has some top scores. He's 9th in books read, number 1 in percentage of books read, just out of the top 10 in 5-star books. But middle and lower ratings for average rating and percent of 5-star reads keeps him lower than I had him at 6, but still a top 10 author for me. Number 8, I had him 5th, is John Steinbeck. So Steinbeck, you see, he has some single-digit scores in average rating 5th, 5-star reads 8th, percentage of 5-star reads 7th, but his books read and percentage of books read are kind of in the middle. So he is one that if I do crunch these numbers at some point in the future again, he will rise through the ranks as I read more of his books for sure. Number 7 is another one of those authors that was not in my subjective top 10, but obviously should be, and that's J.R.R. Tolkien. So Tolkien finishes 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in 3 categories. 1st in percentage of books read, 2 for average rating, tied for 3rd percentage of 5-star reads. His books read total, of course, is one of the lowest. His 5-star books total is bottom 10 as well, but by the strength of what he had written in his lifetime, he does end up 7th. Now, the single greatest surprise for me when I crunched these numbers was seeing that number 6 on this list is Stephen King. So King is finishing very high. He dominated books read. He dominated 5-star books read. For percentage of books read, he finished 6th. Now, some of you probably wondered when I flashed up that graphic how Stephen King wasn't tied for 1st, because haven't you read everything by Stephen King? Well, Stephen King's written a nonfiction book with Stuart Onan about a single season of the Boston Red Sox. And while I am a baseball fan and a Stephen King fan, I haven't read that book. Frankly, don't really want to read that book. So Stephen King, although he was just 1 percentage point below everybody else, this lowered his score because he ended up tied for 6th because there are 5 authors that I've read everything by. So that hurt his bottom line. But what really hurt King and kept him out of the top 5 were his percentage of 5-star reads, which was 4th from the bottom, and then average rating, which was bottom 8. I've always said with King that his ceiling is sky high, and you see that with the number of 5-star reads that I've given for his books. But his floor is pretty low. He probably has the most number of 2-star reads of any author that I've read on this list because he's not always the most consistent author. But I'm still quite shocked to see when I crunch these numbers to see King all the way down at number 6. Top 5. In number 5, I had him at 7th on the list, so not a big stretch to see that Joe Abercrombie is number 5 on my list. So Abercrombie did have tie for first, percentage of books read, and then just solid numbers all around. Top 3 and 5-star books, percentage of 5-star reads, average rating, just out of the top 10 in books read. So that will go up as I read more of him as he puts out more books. But no surprise to see Joe Abercrombie in the top 5. Number 4 is an author I didn't put in that subjective top 10, but now that I see the numbers, I see that I need to consider this guy in my top 10. The reason he's not in my top 10 is he's only written 6 books, but they were super, super strong. The author at number 4 is Justin Cronin. So Cronin finished tied for first in percentage of books read, first place in average rating, second place in percentage of 5-star reads. So books read, he's only written 6 books, so he finishes quite low. But his 5-star books, despite only have written 6 books, he's just outside of the top 10. So Cronin is definitely an example of quality over quantity. And if I ever crunch these numbers again, it'll be interesting as he writes more books if he continues to rise even higher than number 4 on this list. So my top 3 authors, I had put second, third, and fourth on this list. 2 of them were authors that were the reason that I wanted to try to look at this question more objectively. So let's see how Guy Gavriel Kay, Robin Hobb, and Michael Connolly in the top 3, see what the order are. Number 3 is Robin Hobb. That's where I had her in the ranking as well. So Hobb finishes in 3rd in books read and 5-star books, 7th and 8th in the other 3 categories. Now, I would be very curious if I crunch these numbers without the Lindholm side of Hobb's output, because the Hobb side of Hobb's output may have raised her higher. The books read total would have been lower, but every other category would have been higher because I've not read a 5-star book by Lindholm, and her average rating and percentage of 5-star reads would have went up. So I wonder what this would have looked like if she would have potentially been number 1 on this list, because 3rd place to 1st place was a difference of a total of 4.5 points, which is less than 1 place on each of the 5 categories. And the top 2 places were separated by 0.5 point. So is it Connolly or Kay at the top? 2nd place is Michael Connolly. So Michael Connolly finishes top 2 in the first 3 categories. Tied for first, books read, percentage of books read, 2nd place books read, 2nd place number of 5-star books. His average rating is 9th, their percentage of 5-star reads is 10th. I've always said when I've compared King and Connolly together that, King may have the higher ceiling, but Connolly's floor is super high. Of the 40, I think it's 40 books I've read by Connolly, I think 38 of them have been 4 or 5-star reads. He has 2 books that I gave 3 stars and that's it, because he is Mr. Consistent, but not consistent enough to be number 1 on this list. So number 1 on this list is Guy Gavriel Kay. So Kay has not written as much as everybody else. He's written 16 books, but only 15 of them were included in this total. And he's tied for 10th in books read, tied for 7th percentage of books read, but the bottom 3 categories, the 3 more subjective categories, yes, top 4. 1st place in percentage of 5-star reads, 3rd place in average rating, 4th place in 5-star books, and this was before I even read a few of the books by him that I read last month. So what does this all mean? Does this mean that Guy Gavriel Kay is my favorite author? Maybe. I think the biggest thing that crunching these numbers has allowed me to do is to just consider that perhaps somebody other than Stephen King, I can consider them as my favorite author. And Kay and Hobb were the 2 reasons why I've been thinking about this, because I've really loved these authors. And it is harder to compare Guy Gavriel Kay, who's written 16 books, with Stephen King, who's written about 80 books. And King I've read for decades, Kay I've read for a couple years. So am I willing to say definitively Guy Gavriel Kay is my favorite author? Not yet. I'm leaning that way. I do have some recency bias. I've read the last 7 of his books in the last 5 months. So there is some of that recency bias. There is some of that just love of discovering a new author. So I'm going to give it 6 months, and maybe I'll answer that question by the end of the year, whether or not I can say that Guy Gavriel Kay, or even somebody else, is my favorite author. But if anything, these numbers have allowed me to potentially consider that somebody else can come along that can steal my heart, and I can say that this person is my favorite author. So what did you think of this? What did you think of the equation? Were there other categories that I should have considered besides these top 5? As I wrap up here, I'm going to put the total on here so you can see my top 25 authors. You can see kind of the point breakdown and see where the breaks are between authors. But it will be interesting as I continue to read a lot of these authors and discover new authors, how this will change. And I don't know if I'll ever crunch these numbers again, but it was a lot of fun to do this today. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. I want to talk with you about all of these things. Let me know what you thought about the equation, about the approach, about these authors. Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter, Goodreads, and the Fireside Discord. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time,